Alrighty, we've learned a lot about functions and anonymous functions, but what if we want a function to load as soon as the page is done loading? Like when the script is done, just automatically executed. We don't want to give it a particular command. We just want it to execute as soon as possible. Now these are called self-invoking functions. It's a function that is written, and as soon as it's done loading, it starts executing. Now these look a little bit different, and the syntax for this, I'm not going to lie, it's a little bit strange to look at first. But this is a very common type of syntax for JavaScript. JavaScript is one of these languages that's sort of loosely written to better itself in a sense. So it looks a lot like this. You have a function. And so some of this we're familiar with. This part, that's just a normal function. But then when we wrap it in parentheses, you're starting parentheses here and you're closing parentheses here, and then you call it just like a normal function. So anything in here will automatically run when the page, actually not when the page loads, when this function loads, because you can technically have this in different parts of the page that are not running immediately. There. So if we said alert loaded, and we go to our browser, we refresh our page, just like that. Now, in our HTML, if we look at that, there's nothing in there that's calling this function. What makes this function self-invoked is those two parentheses at the very end. If we remove those, go back, refresh the page, nothing happens. And that's because this is just a section of code, and those parentheses say, oh, you have to go and run that, just like a normal function, just like an anonymous function. This self-invoking function says, okay, well, this is loaded, and when it's done loading, well, these parentheses say I have to go and do my job. So it does. It goes and does its job. So why would you ever use this? Well, let's see what you want to do with some dynamic content. Just off the top of my head here, what if we wanted to, when the page loads, have the background color change? So we would select our body. So variable body, document.query selector, body in a string, and that's going to select this. And then we say body.style.background color, camel cased, is equal to 8C1515. And because the text is going to be hard to see, we're going to change the color as well to that. And then let's also change the inner HTML. Welcome to my page. So if we look at the regular HTML, there's nothing on there. We go back to the page, again, there's nothing on there. I'm going to hit F5, and as soon as this JavaScript is done loading, it's going to change the page completely. Just like that. Now we've written no CSS, we've written no HTML. This is purely JavaScript. Now that's what a self-invoking function is. Should you use them all the time? No. Are there times when you want to use them? Absolutely, yeah. Like for example, if you're loading a parallax library, you know how you scroll down the page and some items scroll at a different pace than the rest of the page? That's called parallax. And in JavaScript, you might want to load that immediately. As soon as the page starts loading your JavaScript, you want that to, boom, start loading because it looks best that way. But there are other times where you might not want to, like our calculator that we made. Why would that have to be a self-invoking function? It doesn't. That's an event. That is, when a button is clicked or when a form is submitted, then that function triggers. So there's a place and time for self-invoking functions. There's a place and time for regular or anonymous functions as well. So what I would like you to do for this lesson, just create a self-invoking function. Just go ahead and write it. You have access to all the code that we've been writing throughout this course. However, if you have the time, I would prefer if you could write this out by hand, just so you can sort of get a feel for it. I know sometimes when you're writing a new language, your fingers they're a little bit resistant as to like, why would I put a parentheses here? And then why wouldn't I put a parentheses here or curly brackets? It's good for your muscle memory. It's good for learning to type faster, to be a little bit more productive. And overall, it's just good practice. So if you have the time, I would prefer if you could write this out. But if you're a little bit short on time, feel free to just open up javascript.js, just toy around with this code. even if it's as simple as changing the 8C1515 to just black 000. I just want you to get some hands-on experience with this before we start our next project.